presentation. That will be beautiful, I hope. Okay, let's begin. Today we'll talk about Flutter, how to develop a mobile application using Flutter. So we'll begin with a little bit of story. So let's imagine that you are a big company, okay? And you have a new product you want to test, so it's like a proof of concept, so you need really fast mobile application running on iOS and Android. Maybe you don't have a lot of budget, so you want to do it with a small team. How will you do that? Let's imagine you are a startup, and you want to build your first MVP, your first application. And you have your time to market have to be really fast because you want to see how people react to your application. So you want it on the store, App Store and Android Store, really fast. And you have here also a small team. Or let's imagine you're a developer. You're an Android developer. But you want to create an application in your spare time, and you want to see it also on the App Store, because it is cool to have also your app on the App Store. But you don't want to learn all the iOS framework, Swift stuff, and because you don't have enough time. You are a software developer, and you do a real job. Or let's imagine you're a student. For your final project at school, you want to create a mobile application, and you have a small time. You cannot learn the whole Android framework and how to develop an application natively on iOS. How will you do? So the answer is Flutter. Or at least I will try to show you during this presentation that Flutter is a good answer to all these questions. So let's go. This is the content for today. We will talk about all this stuff. And before I will present myself, so my name is Wilfried Mwenda. I am an Android engineer and a public speaker. Usually I talk about Android, but today I will talk about Flutter because I like it. It's like my hobby. And you can find me on Twitter at EYLey1. I am also on Medium, where I write technical articles about Android and sometime about Flutter also. And I start a podcast. Raise your hand if you know what is a podcast. Okay, cool, we're in a good place. So I start a podcast, and the name of the podcast is, let's guess, Learning Flutter. So we will not talk about this podcast, but I invite you to go to check on iTunes if you want, if you're interested. So that's it. So what is Flutter? So the most important question of the presentation. Flutter is a mobile user interface framework. It is free and open source. It was made by Google, and it is used by Google. And this framework helps you create high-performing mobile application for Android and for iOS, just writing your code one time. So this is really interesting. The best part, it offers you a fast development experience. There is a feature called hot reload that can reload the code you modify, and you have it under 1 second on your device. So for developer, it is really interesting to have this kind of experience when developing. What you need if you want to set up Flutter on your computer and you want to develop an application. 64-bit operating system. You will need a lot of space. And like tools, the first tool, the most important tool is Git, because you will have to download the Flutter SDK from the GitHub repository. And after, you have to run a command called Flutter Doctor. This is like the most important command because it helps you to understand if you have some problem with your setup, if you have some maybe missing dependencies, maybe you need to install more tools before you're able to develop application, for example, for Android platform or for iOS platform. So it is really easy. You run the Flutter Doctor, and he will tell you what is missing. When everything is checked, on the result of this command, you're good to go to develop. Now let's talk a little bit about Dart. What is Dart? So Dart is the programming language we use to develop application with Flutter. Raise your hand if you already know Dart. Okay, small amount of people, cool. So Dart is a general purpose programming language, also created and made by Google, surprise, surprise. And it was approved by ECMA standard. What is cool and interesting about that is it is really easy to learn. For example, I am a Java developer, and I learned that without reading the documentation, and this is really interesting on my point of view. So I go to the documentation, just one, I have to use a complex feature I didn't know before, but it's really easy to learn. If you are already a developer, you don't have to learn how to use this language. So it uses class-based, optionally typed, and it have interesting feature, like I like the asynchronous feature, which use future type and stream type, really interesting. And the best part of using that language when doing mobile programming is that you can create your layout with the same language, which will where you create also the control of that layout. If there is an Android developer in the room, raise your hand. Okay, some people, okay. So you know you have to develop, for example, the layout in XML, and you put it on the file, and then the other class will be right in Java. So here we write everything in the same place. So this can be, on my point of view, also an advantage. A little bit of story about Flutter. So Sky is the first code name of the project, and it was unveiled to the public on that Summit conference. It was in 2015. At that moment, it was running on Android operating system. 2 years later, so 2017, last year, we had the Google I/O announcement of the alpha release, and it was the first time I heard about Flutter. And until then, I began to learn a little bit, doing some stuff, and try to create some small application. And at the beginning of this year, February, we have the beta release. What does it mean? On my point of view, it means that there is a big community of developers, which help also the Flutter team and contribute a lot of open source code around this around Flutter ecosystem. So this is really interesting, and I think it will continue to grow. Let's talk a little bit about tooling. This is some command you can use when you develop with Flutter. So we have the logs, so you can see the logs directly on the command line. Using this command, you can take a screenshot of the application you are using, or you can, for example, run your unit test locally of your current project, or you can use trace if you want, for example, to measure the CPU time while you're using your application. Okay, now we'll talk about widgets. And this is interesting because widget is, I think, the most important component of the Flutter framework from a developer point of view. In fact, we say, this is a famous sentence in the Flutter world, in Flutter, everything is a widget. Excuse me. Okay. In Flutter, everything is a widget. So repeat after me. In Flutter, everything is? Again, in Flutter, everything is? Okay, cool. So we have some energy here. So you are saying that, okay, everything is a widget, but what is a widget? So let me explain. A widget is actually each immutable declaration of a part of a user interface. So when you are seeing the screen of your application, if you have a part of a user interface that you have declared in your code, this is a widget. So usually on the screen, you will see a lot of widgets. But now I will say you that all those widgets form another big widget. And this is to introduce a new concept called widget tree, because widgets are composable in Flutter. You can create one widget using other widgets. But we'll talk about this later. Let's focus on just what is the widget. So a widget can help you define a structural element, like, for example, a button, for example, a menu, for example, a text. It can help you to define a stylistic element, like color, fonts, and stuff like that. Or you can define also an aspect of the layout, for example, padding, or, for example, the position, center, left, right, stuff like that. And so you can define everything of the user interface with a widget. We will see some example of widget now, so we can go to something practical. For example, I want to create a text widget. I will write just this. So new text, and then I will put here a property, which is a string, Flutter quotes, and this will give me a text. If I want something a little bit more complex, like a button, for example, I want to create a flat button from the material design elements, so I will have new flat button. Here I have to put two mandatory properties. So the first one is a child, so I put the text that will be on the button. And the second one is on press, where I will write instruction that will be run if the user click on my button. So, and this is the way actually we define widget in Flutter. So new, the name of the widget, and then you have some properties. Some one are mandatory, some one are not mandatory, so you can let them. Let's go ahead. Now we will talk about other widgets. Before going Flutter, I want to tell you that the Flutter framework comes with a lot of built-in widgets. So we have a collection of widgets. Someone use iOS style widget, we call it Cupertino, and other one are widgets from material design widget and other widgets. So there is a big collection. So when you want to create a widget to create your user interface, you go to the collection, you pick one widget, you read the documentation, how does it work, what are the mandatory parameters, there is an example code on how to create that widget, okay, you pick it, you use it, and that's it. Maybe you want to create a complex widget which is not in that collection, you can create your own widget using other existing widgets. So, but this is a little bit complex. But now let's say these two widgets, which are the most important widget on my point of view in Flutter. It is the row widget and the column widget. So a row widget is simply a widget that will have children inside, and they will be aligned as a row. For the column, they will be aligned as a column. These two are the most important because each kind of complex user interface can be defined as a combination of some row and some column of other widgets. If everything is clear right now, can you raise your hand and say that it's okay? Cool. So the half of people here are not understanding what you are saying. Raise your hand if everything is clear. Okay, that's better. So this is it. You can find all the Flutter widgets on the collection. Like I was saying, the collection is here, flutter.io/widget. The catalog of all the widgets which are built in. Now we come back again to this concept, the widget tree. So I was saying before, in Flutter, a widget can be composed by other widgets, and there is also inheritance. All children of a father widget will inherit of the property of the father widget. If we take a simple example of that, let's say I create a father widget which is called center. It is a widget that helps you center element on the user interface on the screen. Inside that center element, I create another widget, which is a button. What I will have is a button, which inherits the center property from the father widget, so my button will be center on the user interface. So it is a little bit like this, that we have composition and inheritance. Let's see one example. You can see here on the right, we have a piece of user interface. On the left, we have the widget tree corresponding. So here we have the father widget. It is a column. So all these, we have a column. And this column widget have three children. So we have here two text and one row. So here is the first text, the second text. In head, we have the row here. And this row widget will have all the children, one image here and one text here, so the image and the text. So this is it, simple. Let's go ahead. Now we will talk about stateless widget and stateful widget, because in Flutter, your widget can be stateless or stateful. And this will help us understand how Flutter manages the interaction when you are creating a mobile application, interaction with the user. So a stateless widget is simply a widget that will not change. Example, I create a text widget. As a property, I give him a constant string. So all the time, my widget will be just that text. It will never change. So these widgets will be defined as a stateless widget. But we also have stateful widgets. What are stateful widgets? Stateful widgets are widgets which have state. And a state is an object of the Flutter framework. What is a state? A state is one or more values, which are variables. And those variables obviously can change. If a variable of my state change, that means the state change, the Flutter framework will be notified, and he will withdraw the whole widget tree on the screen. So we can have the new changes, let's say like this. A simple example can be, for example, the counter example. If I have a screen here, and we have a button with the text increment, and we have a text widget with an integer inside, 0. Every time I click, I will have to increment that number, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. What I will have is our whole screen, so the Flutter widget, we have a state containing a value with an integer. Every time I click the button, I will update the integer with adding increment by 1. When I will update my integer, which is part of the state, the Flutter framework will be notified. So the framework will withdraw the widget tree. When he will withdraw the widget tree, the text will be withdrawn with the new value of my integer, which will be incremented. So this is the way it works. Now let's talk a little bit about platform widgets. Platform widget, this is important if you want your application to look exactly like a native application. So I want, for example, my iOS application to be like a normal iOS application with the same style and stuff like that. I want my Android application will have the look and feel of a material design application. How we can do this? So we have these two kind of widget, material component widget for Android and Cupertino iOS style widget for iOS. There is a global variable called default target platform, and at one time it will have a value which can be targetplatform.iOS or targetplatform.android, and you just have to check when you are creating your widget. If it is iOS, you just create the iOS style version. If it is Android, you create the material component widget style. So this is the way you handle it. But someone maybe want to create a mobile application which have the same look and feel on the two platforms, so you don't have to worry about this. You just create exactly the widget you want, and they will look the same in the two platforms. So this is if you want to do something, let's say, custom. And now, what kind of tests we can do with a Flutter application? We can do unit testing. Like, we want to test a piece of code like a function. So here, you don't need a device or an emulator, because the test will run locally using a local version of that virtual machine and a headless version of the Flutter engine. We also have widget testing when you want to test a single widget. So before the test, you will actually draw a widget tree which contains the widget you want to test, and you will try to perform operation the user usually perform on your widget, like I click on this button, I scroll here and stuff like that, and you will try to check if you have the result you want. Here you will need your device or emulator to test. And we also have integration testing, which is just UI automated test. So as you know, if you're in Android, you maybe use espresso testing or UI automation on iOS. Is there someone here who is iOS developer? Okay, so UI automation, you understand what we're talking about, right? Okay, cool. And let's see some use case. So we want to see real application on the real world built with Flutter on the marketplace. So we say we are not talking about some toy that nobody is using. So we already have some use case. They are not a lot. So we have a Hamilton application, which is like the most famous use case of Flutter application. So this application was built for a Broadway show in America, if I don't mind, and they create an application for iOS and Android where the fans of the show can buy tickets using the application, have information about the show, and they can buy other stuff related to the show, have the program of the show and stuff like that. And it was a huge success as far as I read. And then we have, excuse me, okay. And then we have Hooker. It's an application which handle all your social network in the same place. I think it's available for iOS and Android on Marketplace. And we have Bendometer. This is available just on the App Store. It's an application, a musical application for instruments called harmonica. Here there is somebody which play harmonica, no? Which know what is harmonica? Okay, we have one person here, cool, cool. And okay, we have a bonus slide. I want to explain you a rule. Since I really like Flutter, so I can talk about Flutter for a long time, so I decided to add some bonus slides, so to add a little bit of information in this presentation. So now I create a new rule. The rule is, if we have a bonus slide, you have to say, yeah! So I say, bonus slide. Yeah. Okay, let's do again. Bonus slide. Yeah. Okay, I like this. So we have the platform channels. So I will explain you a little bit. This is like a complex concept of Flutter. Let's imagine you want to create a complex feature which is not implemented yet in the Flutter framework, or this feature will not be implemented in the Flutter framework. It's just a complex stuff you want to do in your application, and you don't know how to do it. For example, you want to recognize the face of someone just from a picture, for example, face recognition, and there is no way to do it in Flutter. But you know that it is possible to do it natively in iOS and in Android. So you will try to do some research, and you will create some function in maybe Swift and Objective-C for iOS, in Kotlin or Java for Android, and you have these two pieces of code for these two native code. The Flutter application will help you, giving you, with your Flutter application, one part of the project will be an Android project, and one part of the project will be an iOS project. In those little part of the project, you can put your native function, and when your application will be running on the phone, there will be a channel open between these two parts of the application. And when your Flutter app will call that function, using the channel, it will go to talk to the right platform methods. Like if you have running on an Android phone, he will talk to the native Android function you develop. And he will use the real API on the phone, of the Android platform API, or other third-party API, for example. So this creates the flexibility that in Flutter you can also implement stuff that the Flutter team didn't think about, or stuff that you want to add, but it is not yet in Flutter framework. So this is the way you add new feature or complex features. Now the question is, let's imagine that you do this for your feature, and it is really cool, and you want all the developers use the same feature, so they don't have to redo it alone. So here I'm talking about library, basically. So you want to do something, you search for a library. So the question is there something similar to library in Flutter? And the answer is, we have another bonus slide. Yeah. Cool. So library are called Flutter plugins in the Flutter world. So when you create something which is not developed, so you create it for iOS and for Android, so you write the native code, and then you compile it in something called Flutter plugins, and then you will put it on the GitHub repository of the Flutter team, and will be listed as an official plugins, and people can use it. So actually, we have a bunch of plugins, I think, and you can find them on this page, github/Flutter/plugins. So Flutter helps you create this kind of package, and then you can share them, so you can enrich the Flutter and that ecosystem. The famous, or the most famous Flutter plugins I know is the Firebase plugin, and it's really cool because you can integrate Firebase in your Flutter application really fast, because they already implement all the stuff for you, both on iOS and Android. So you go just with that language and you're okay. And there are all the Flutter plugins, so I invite you to check. And also, you can create your own plugins if you want to contribute to open source and stuff like that. Is there someone here who contribute to open source? Okay, small amount of people, cool. Let's go. Another bonus slide. Yeah. Again, another bonus slide. Yeah. Okay, cool. So I present you the next episode of the podcast. And during that episode, I talked with a Dart developer called Kevin Sego, and he developed also some Flutter application in his spare time. We talk a little bit about Dart language and how to develop application in Flutter. It is an interesting episode, I think, and it will be out at the end of this week or the next week, so I invite you to check it. And this guy created an open source application in Flutter. It is a client for Gitter chat. Someone know Gitter chat? Okay, so I create this client for Gitter chat for iOS and Android, and you can find it on his GitHub profile. Okay, now we arrive to the end, so the final part, the example. So I present you the Flutter quotes, an application developed using Flutter. So let's see the features of this application. The first feature is the management of the identity and authentication. So you can create an account, register, and then you can log into the application and use it. Second feature is you can have the list of already existing quotes in the application. And the third feature is you can add a new quote by specifying the author, and then you write a quote. So simple application about quotes, nothing complex. So let's see a little bit. This is the technologies used to create the application. So Out0 was used to manage identity and authentication. Firebase was used as a backend for our database to add new quotes. And okay, it's built with Flutter. Now let's go a little bit deep in how we create the widget of this application. So here we have the screen of the quotes, you can see. So let's go to see. This is the code of the creation of the widgets. So here, for example, we have, okay, we don't see this part. Wait just 2 seconds. I try to. Okay, so let's continue like this for a moment. So here we have the padding, which is a further widget. And we have a padding here because here you can see we have a lot of space around our user interface. And we have the padding. Here we have how much is this padding, 32. After that, we have a flexible widget because we want our list to take a lot of space available here. And inside this flexible, we have a Firebase animated list. And this is a widget from the Firebase plugin I talked about before. So this widget handles for me the query to the Firebase database. When he receives the answer, he handles the answer directly on the list. So I just have to define some properties that he needs. I saw there is a guy here from Firebase. So maybe you know what I'm talking about. And so we have to define all this stuff, and we have also to define the widget quotes, which define how our quotes will be rendered. So the title and then the body of the quotes. Here we have the second element of our column, which is an align widget because we want to align the button here. Inside this align, we have a child, which is a floating action button, which is this one. So this is exactly the application of what we were talking before. So let's see the next one. So here we have a form widget. I think a lot of people know what is a form. Someone developed in HTML before know what is a form. Just 3 people? No, we are kidding. Okay, so we have a form here which have a list of fields. We have to put input. So in this form widget, we will have a child which is a list view, and the list view contains 3 elements, 3 widgets. Text form widget, these 2 text form widgets. And then we have a container which aligns in the center my raise button, which is this button from the material design elements. So this is how this part is designed. All the text form fields have a lot of properties I define because I want to have some hint, I want to have an icon here and stuff like that. And there are also other stuff like, for example, the validation, because I want to validate my field and stuff like that. Okay, now we will see some logic. So how the logic works in this application? This is actually the way the logic works in each screen of basically simply of Flutter applications. I will just explain how the welcome screen works, and because the other screen work the same way. So in the welcome screen, I have a state, because the welcome screen is a stateful widget. This state have 2 Boolean values, is loading and logit, and this value help me understand which widget I want to draw on the screen. Is loading is telling me that I am doing some background work, maybe I'm talking to the server for authentication or Firebase for querying for the quotes. Is logit is used to say me if the user is authenticated or not authenticated. So like you can see in this table, we have some value true and false. Each combination gives me the right widget to design on the screen. So when you open the application for the first time, these 2 values are initialized to false, false. You can see false, false correspond to the welcome screen, the login screen. That say you have to log in. If the user click on the button login, I will change one element of my state, which is I will change this loading because I'm going to call a function which will talk to the server for the authentication. So this loading will become true, and this will change the state. The framework is notified, and the widget true is withdrawn. And using this combination will be in is loading is true because there is background work, and authenticated is false. So we will put the progress widget that will say work in progress. And so on. So each time I know my state is changing, I change my state, and the widget will be withdrawn with the right widget I need. Okay, so you can find this application on GitHub on my GitHub profile. The project is master login, and you can go deeper and see all the stuff I didn't talk about in this presentation, which is like an introduction. But my application was built using the model view controller, model view presenter pattern, and I also put other stuff interesting that you can check. Other thing we can see here. Okay, Flutter community. So you're a developer, you want to try Flutter at home and see how is it. You want to create your small application, or you want to create a plugins and contribute to the open source. That is cool. You have a lot of ways to enter in the Flutter community. You can use Twitter, you can use Google Groups, you can use the GitHub, the official GitHub of the Flutter project. You can use also the Git chat. I saw 2 people here, Gitters. And you can also ask your question on Stack Overflow, see if someone have an answer to your question. So this is my invitation to you. And that's it. Thank you for your attention. Okay, so this is the moment for the Q&A question. Okay, yes.
Thanks for the presentation.
You're welcome.
What would you say is the biggest advantage of this technology comparing to other hybrid platforms like JavaScript-based Xamarin or PhoneGap or stuff like that?
Okay. Big question. Okay, what is the advantage of using Flutter instead of using the other hybrid stuff? I know that um, all the hybrid framework have the advantage and disadvantage. I think that the other hybrid have something we call, I don't know how to say this, like they are not using the native code, so they are doing something with how we call it, with DOM elements and stuff like that. So they're using actually a browser, or I don't know exactly because I never use them, but I know that they are doing too much work. The Flutter framework have an advantage that it's an engine built with C++, and we also have a part write completely in that language, and everything is done by the framework. There is no repetition of hard work because the way they build the framework, they were already thinking about mobile development. So they try to do stuff in a way that everything is really fast. In fact, when your application is running, you have, I think it is 30 or 36 frames per second that the Flutter engine can do on the screen. It can redraw the screen really fast. The widget tree can be redrawn really fast. And that's made, this is because the Flutter engine is really powerful and it is made fastly. But I cannot explain exactly the real reason because you have to go really deeply technically on how they develop the framework. But I think you can check it on their website where they have some technical slide and technical explanation on how the Flutter framework works deeply inside and why it is so fast. You're welcome. Yes.
How does the architecture work? I mean, is
yeah.
the Dart code compiled to native targets, or the app runs a VM inside and executes the Dart code in a thread? Do you know how it works?
Ah, okay. Yes, there is some compilation of the Dart code, and I think the Dart code is compiled in at runtime when we already know what is the platform we are running on, and he'll use the build tools of that platform to compile the Dart code. But I don't have the real detail on how it is done. But it does something like this. And it also uses the whole Flutter engine, which can compile its own code. And in fact, your APK is downloaded on the phone with one part of the Flutter engine, and it does something like this. But I will check a little bit to have more information about that. Maybe we can talk after the talk about this to have some details. Yes. Hi. Thank you.
Probably a silly question, but I can only hope. If I'm developing on Linux, can I build that for iOS?
If you are developing on Linux, can you?
Can I build that for iOS? Can I build that for iOS?
Okay.
Build target for iOS.
Okay, good question. No, it is impossible. Yes, exactly, because it is impossible. You have to buy a MacBook Pro if you want to develop for iOS. So actually, let me explain a little bit to be clear. You want to develop an application for iOS? Okay, you can write the code. It's a hybrid application. Yes, for both targets. Okay, if the code you are writing in Dart, if you are writing the Dart code, you can write it on your Linux computer and there is no problem. But when you want to test it on an iOS phone, you will need a MacBook Pro at that moment. So you can do the whole development on your computer, there's no problem. But when you will have to test it, you will need a MacBook Pro because you need Xcode. So that's... Yeah, maybe in the future, but I think it's more a problem of Apple than of Flutter, because maybe Apple has, yes. Okay. Other questions? Yes?
You showed us the screen of the quotes app.
Yes?
Some of this floating action button thing, I don't want it in my iOS application.
Ah, okay.
My code actually looks like if I have to distinguish
Okay, so like I was explaining in another slide, which is this, the slide of the platform widgets, if I found it here, okay? So we have to use this variable, default target platform, and what you will do is, for each part, you have two ways to do it. The first way is you create a team. So by creating a team, you can define, for example, the color and the style, the style of the whole application. And you can define the style, which is more iOS, and the style, which is Android. After the style, you can apply the theme for the whole application. And this is one thing you can do. And then for the button, specifically for the button, when you define this button, you will have to check at that moment. If the platform is iOS, you will define an iOS button from the Cupertino widgets. And you will put an else, and then you will put an Android button, an Android widget.
Only applying different styles to an element, like sometimes it's necessary to have the element at a complete different position in the UI. So applying styles is not enough sometimes.
Yes, applying style is not enough sometimes, because sometimes you have custom widgets that cannot be related to the theme and to the style. So you have actually to use the widget from iOS or the widget for Android. I don't know if it was clear, the answer.
So basically, we end up with having code which says Android place the button here, iOS place it.
Exactly. For the moment, in Flutter framework, you have to do this. If you want your application look like iOS on iOS and like Android on Android, you have to do this. Maybe in the future, they will find a more, let's say, easy way to do it. You're welcome. Okay. Thank you, everyone. So we thank the AppBuilders.